is on my side.
This is Marcus Hollinger, and this is the 116 Live Show on Holy Culture Radio, Sirius XM Channel 154. We're so thankful to be here this evening with you. We thank you that you're spending your evening with us.
Sure.
And
sure.
Today we have we're just gonna get right into it. Last week, if you listened in, we had a chance to sit with Ben Washer and Lecrae.
Amazing conversation.
That was a great conversation, and if you didn't listen to that conversation, we covered 20 years of Reach Records, the past, present day stuff, future stuff. And to be honest, Ace, I think we might have to bring them back.
No, we're gonna have to bring them back. I mean, there was stuff that was never said publicly that was revealed on that show, and I feel like, man, we just gotta. And there's still so much that needs to be said. So shout out for you, for Lecrae, for Ben, everybody tuning in just to keep that conversation going.
Yeah, you
I think it's important. Yeah,
you too.
It's always weird shouting out yourself. So I just kind of like.
Oh yeah, of course, man. Yeah, I got you, no doubt.
Thank you. Thanks.
And
for
so if you didn't listen to that episode, definitely encourage you to try to find it.
Yeah.
Maybe tune in. If you didn't listen to that episode, then one thing that you can do is hit us up. Let us know. Hit us up at Reach Records on socials, and let us know if you have any questions about the legacy of Reach Records. Or it's 20 years. We're definitely gonna have those guys back in.
Yeah.
If there are things that you want us to cover, we would love to continue that conversation for you because we love you. We appreciate you.
No, for sure, man. Let's get into it, man. How you feeling today? What's up?
Today,
how you feeling this week?
This week,
how you feeling this moment?
This week, I'm feeling good because, man, we got the first episode of this show out.
Right.
It took a lot of people, a lot of work to get that first episode. So I feel really good. I'm glad and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that we have the opportunity to do this.
Right.
I saw RG.
Played you some new
RG
vibes.
Played me some new music, and I got the chance to. Yesterday was Hovey's birthday.
Yep.
He recently had his kid.
Yeah.
I'm very excited, man. I'm good.
It's like this year is kicking off really strong, especially just specifically the Reach Records roster of people just really getting to it, and like a lot of new ideas, music, things to really kick off the year. So it's starting off. I mean, obviously behind the scenes we're in tune.
Yeah.
But just stand by. Some great things
and that's
on the
some
way.
things that we want to do with the show is to bring people, our behind the scenes perspective. We want to share. We want to share it with our listeners. So, I would ask you the same thing. How are you this morning? How are you?
I'm good. I love Januaries like I love Mondays. So I just love the top of the year energy, top of the week energy. So I'm good. Obviously, I think, for what we do and being people that are involved in Christian hip hop, affectionately termed as CHH. I feel like you have to be in it to know it, but I think that term has just owned its own thing and identity. So I think there's a lot of conversation going on around that term.
Yeah.
And this subgenre. People say this space. I mean, what you thinking, man?
Yeah. Well, I think like you said, just you probably kind of led us into what we want to talk about today, which is, earlier this year, maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and for the last week, 2 weeks, this conversation has been going around, or it had been said that CHH is dead. And so, I know, you and I have naturally had some conversations about it.
Yeah.
And this is a show about Christian hip hop, for Christian hip hop, by Christian hip hop.
Yeah.
So it seemed like it's something that we should probably talk about.
I think it's relevant.
Yeah.
I think it's relevant. I think it's almost like people ask us always, like, in different rooms and not on camera, how we feel. I think it'd be good to kind of just dive into that. Because I mean, you were asking me how things are going, and it's funny. I mean, recently there was like a really good, Tadashi had an amazing sync placement.
Yeah, Get Out My Way.
Get Out My
was
Way.
In the
iPhone 14
iPhone commercial for the 14.
And I feel like that moment seemed to have kind of happened like literally
right at the same time.
Right at the same time. Yeah.
And also Limo was announced as one of Tidal's 12 artists to watch. For the year.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's almost like that conversation was happening at a time where some really good things,
right,
at the time when some really good things
were happening
as well,
quote unquote CHH
for Christian
the
hip
umbrella,
hop
Christian hip-hop,
artists who fall under that umbrella. So it just okay, well
it's good.
let's dive into this.
For sure.
And so I think a great place to start with that, maybe Ace, I'd love to hear, how did you come into Christian hip hop? I think when we have conversations like this and we talk about hot topic issues, and we're gonna go there today. We've already made that agreement between us, but I think it's important for us to really share where you to expose our lens. How we came into the space, how we see the space, things like that, and then kind of catch up to some
giving a little bit of context so that
type of things.
Yeah, I feel that. What's funny, I think as I'll share a very condensed version of it. I think there are some similarities between my journey with Christian hip hop and yours, which I think you revealed that the other day while talking about a certain Lecrae song and album. So I think there is like some
wow.
So like
just very full circle moments.
Maybe God behind the scenes was organizing some stuff.
So that we don't leave our listeners out.
Hanging, yeah.
Remind them of that moment.
So
what are you talking about?
We was in the studio talking with RG about innovation or different artists, talk about Lecrae's, things that he's done, and I was basically saying how like when I first came, my first placement in Christian hip hop as a producer happened to be Lecrae's check-in intro track on the Rehab album. Yeah. And I remember at the time as a producer hearing other tracks on the album and even in that space that kind of sounded like, and somebody's going to definitely ding me for this, so hey, shoot the shot. Those, because you can pull my card a few times where I have done this, but some of the tracks sounded like Christian copies of what hip hop was doing. Yeah. And not that that's totally just a miss, but I remember people asking me like, what inspired the innovation on the check-in track, which to me was sonically a little bit left of center and innovative. And I was just like, I mean, that's just how it came out. My brain always heard stuff a little differently. And I wanted to, it wasn't that I was trying to bring that flavor to Christian hip hop to redeem it or save it. It was just, that's what came out. And that was my first placement. And you mentioned how like, the Rehab album was something that was one of your first touch points with Christian hip hop.
It was definitely, So I think for our listeners, what Ace is basically saying here is his journey into Christian hip hop. One of the first significant moments in his journey into Christian hip hop was as a producer. He produced the check-in record on Lecrae's Rehab, and the conversation that we were having, I told Ace, wow, that I didn't know that, bro. We've been friends now for 5 years. I didn't know that. Yeah. And what I told Ace was my into Christian hip hop, and I'll share this with y'all as our listeners, is I got radically saved in college. This was maybe 2010, and I was a part of a campus ministry, studying marketing at the University of Kansas, and one of my frat brothers played the Lecrae album for me, and I gave my life to Jesus, but music and marketing. I always told people, if you cracked me open, you would see three things. You would see marketing, you would see music, and you would see the Bible. That's all that's there. Like, that is crazy. Literally it. That's all. And at that time, the music part of me was fusing with the Bible part of me, and I needed that Rehab album. Right. I didn't even know Christian hip hop was a thing. All I knew was this album. I didn't even know never heard of Lecrae. Right. But my brother passed me this album, and it was the soundtrack of what I was going through. And so to fast forward a bit, to find out one of my closest friends and co-workers produced the record that really sticks out in my mind, that
and shout out to my boy Motown who produced the record with me. Amazing. But yeah.
So I mean, we took a little bit of a dip there, but Ace, I really want to hear, how did you? So you one of your first records was bring me in on your journey.
I'll bring you in. Yeah.
You produced that record.
Yeah, I produced that record. I had two other records on there with I was part of a production team, PK, one day, and we did Check In, Walking on Water, and used to do it too. People always make fun of me for that record, but that was a bop. And that was my first placement history. Obviously, I had heard about Lecrae in like 2006 because my sister was in college at the time, and they were bumping his stuff at their campus ministry. So I already I think it was Jesus music. I was like, oh, this is hard. I remember like being hit, but I ain't like dive all the way in. Even before that, I mean, in high school, my cousin, who was like our youth leader at our church, was a huge fan of Cross Movement.
Yeah,
because he was like a Wu-Tang fan. So this is like the next best East Coast version of Christian hip hop. So I was up on it. I had the House of Representatives album.
Okay,
this ain't Christ. It's not spiritual. It's a bunch of spirit rituals. Like I had like all that, and I felt like
you kind of had a lot of early Christian hip hop influence. Like you had an awareness of this thing for a while, basically before you kind of
okay. I did.
Okay,
I just once in 2010. It's funny. Our stories are starting to sync, bro.
Yeah.
In 2010, 3 months before I got married is when I placed those tracks with Lecrae. Got married. Rehab comes out in August, September, and then I just start diving deeper in Christian hip hop. At that point, I had already kind of rededicated my life like a year or two before, so I was really invested in the Christian life and actually living out the gospel. And I just started hit the ground running and started producing. I was in a Christian hip hop group called PK one day.
Yeah.
Don't look it up. But that was my first introduction.
Yeah.
And it just kind of, I've always stayed tapped in.
Yeah.
Partly you could also say because I was a producer.
Yeah.
It was like a business thing too. Like it wasn't like I was hanging out with Lecrae.
It kind of, it's almost like for me as I listen to it, it's a you were Christian hip hop in the sense
you can say that,
you were, because you were producing. You had an awareness of what was going on around you, and you were participating from a business perspective. You were putting things out, and you were sustaining it. So to me, that sounds like you were it. You were really part of the movement. So that's good. I think it's important. I think it's important for us to share our perspectives a bit and give some context for who we are as we enter into these conversations.
I mean, would you say you were from rehab on and college in that moment where you kind of like invested and dived into the Christian hip hop space?
Yeah.
Okay.
So and it's funny. Stepping back just a little bit, because I think it's super important for me to say this again. I remember when I got to the college. I got to college in 2008, and as far as picking my major, I used to tell all my teachers, they would be like, "Yo, what do you want to study?" I'd be like, "I want to be Russell Simmons. Whatever I got to study to be Russell Simmons.
To me.
I want to be him.
That's
what
amazing.
Is it?" And I was like, okay, maybe take this class. So when I tell you about my influences, I mean, it is that simple. So then I'm doing well in college, I started to have, kind of started to break down for reasons we'll probably talk about later. And that led me to Christ. Her rehab was like, medicine for me. And then, I dove in, and I remember, looking everybody up. I remember, I found out about Andy, and then I found out about Beautiful Eulogy. I found out about S.O.
Okay.
I found out about Swoop. I found out about a lot of these guys, and I remember just as I just really kind of starting to do my thing, I looked into, I think I started to get on the internet and look for it, and I found Rapzilla, and I was like, oh, snap. Like, when I hit Rapzilla, that was when it kind of went off.
Shout out Rapzilla.
Yeah, man, shout out to Rapzilla, shout out to Philip Rude, shout out to Justin Sarachek. And when I got to Rapzilla, I realized, oh, this is like a culture.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was writing raps at the same time too, because I would rap. I 16.
So every music executive
did some music. So when I was 16, I've been writing raps my whole life. When I was 16 years old, I used to stand outside the gas stations in my city, sell my mixtapes for cash.
No way.
Yep.
No way.
All of that. So I was having maybe a similar experience to you, but it wasn't in Christian hip hop, because nobody in my family is a Christian, so I didn't have that environment. I had more of like a street hip hop
You
environment.
was
My dad,
young Jay-Z vibe.
I mean, if that's what you would call it, my dad rapped all. So I think what I'm trying
Hollinger
to,
the hustler. Okay,
what I'm trying,
I had to get
what
that
I'm
one
trying
off.
to Marcus the market. Some say. So where that got to for me was I found out about Rapzilla. And then I found out about, and this is really gonna zoom us right in. And I tell DJ Wado, shout out DJ Wado, because then I found his mix show.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, this is like a thing. And I got humbled because I was like, these dudes are really rapping about the Bible and they're doing it in a way that I don't think I can do. I think I need to go get my theology up to be able to. And I remember Wado wrote an article, and I promise you I tell this to him every time I see him. Wado wrote an article that said, why you need to stop rapping.
Whoa.
And he said, we need more executives.
Whoa.
And he mentioned Ben Washer, and that led me to look up Ben Washer. That led me to ask for a breakfast with him. Ben Washer and I got breakfast. He asked me to move from Kansas to Atlanta to intern at Reach Records, and 8 years later, we're here.
Dang.
Yeah, so that's my story. Good to have yours. We're gonna take a quick break.
Okay.
And then now that we've had the chance to establish where we're coming from, we're gonna get right into the conversation.
Get into it.
If you're just listening in, this is the 116 Life. I'm Marcus Hollinger.
I'm Ace Harris.
And today we're talking about the saying Christian hip hop is dead. We're gonna come right back after this break, but we got some fire Christian hip hop for you. Keep it locked. It's Holy Culture Radio. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, my name is Marcus.
I'm Ace Harris.
And this is the 116 Life on Holy Culture Radio. Today, Ace and I are here in the studio talking about the controversial statement that's been going around for a couple weeks, which stated that Christian hip-hop is dead. If you missed our first segment, Ace and I were just catching up a little bit, giving our stories, giving our journey into Christian hip-hop, because we think it's important, before you enter a room and join a conversation, we think it's important that you state where you coming from.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying? So that people can have context for the things you say and why. So Ace, we talked about your journey making records, placing records. You did a couple records on Rehab. We talked about myself kind of coming from an outside in perspective, and kind of brought us up to how and why we're here today in the positions that we're in. So let's just kind of go right in on this on the topic. It was said, believe Christian Grey. It was a tweet from him. He retweeted someone, and his retweet said Christian hip hop is dead, and it seemed like it just kind of blew things wide open. And a lot of things have been said since then. And I just want to say first and foremost that I love Christian Grey's music.
He's phenomenal.
School of Roses was also one of those albums that was formative for me, because I was like, dang, not only is this a culture, I talked about that earlier where I said until I found Rapzilla, I didn't know it was a culture.
Right.
But then when I found Christian Grey's School of Roses, I was like, man, it's R&B in this thing too. And he's truth is that I don't.
You tapped in.
I still listen to that album today. So Christian, if you hear this, man, I just want to say I love you.
Yeah,
I never had the chance to say that.
I think also there was someone else who said, actually, I was just talking, I was on a call, so I can say his name. I don't think there's any issue. Brandon Boone had tweeted that too, from BYOD, CHH is Dead. And I just, look, those comments, those tweets can just create firestorm conversation. And I would, I think people have the right to say that if it's coming from a place that they really feel is true.
Yeah.
And also, I think that statement allows other people to chime in on what that means, which is why we're here.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Shout out to both guys for saying that, because it has forced the conversation. A lot of good things. A lot of good. So hopefully we can bring some perspective to this. So Ace, I guess when you hear, what comes to mind? What comes to mind when you? What was the first thing you thought about when you saw this conversation going?
I mean, I was curious as to what that meant, because that phrase CHH is dead is technically, I don't want to assume people's motives, but it's like a sample. It's a derivative of hip hop is dead.
Yeah.
Which I obviously, back in like 2005, 2006, Nas went on a campaign, named an album Hip Hop is Dead.
Yeah.
And this was literally in the middle of the ringtone era.
Yeah.
This is the middle of the...
He had a record set. Dun, 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 dun,
But Will I Am on it.
Hip-hop is dead.
Ironically...
The DJ. Better every jack, better the DJ. Better every jack, better the DJ. If hip-hop is dead before I wake. Okay.
So like that song, it was... He went on a campaign, and from what I remember of that moment, he was talking about how hip-hop had devolved into a melodic, singy, jingly ringtone era. There was a lot of Atlanta music that was coming out, Laffy Taffy.
South had it.
And his perspective was hip hop is dead.
Yeah.
And that creates a lot of uproar and a lot of firestorm. And so
and
zooming out, I mean, hip hop didn't die. It evolved.
I think it's even funny that Nas said that. That was around my senior year in high school, maybe around like 2008.
Okay.
That was happening. A lot of things were dying. I remember there was a national campaign to have a funeral for the N-word.
Oh, yeah.
At the same time as the hip hop is dead thing. And ultimately, I think why it's cool to talk about that hip hop is dead statement is because it kind of helps put things into perspective. And one of the things that I hear in that is that all things go through cycles.
Yeah.
And for Nas in 2008 to say hip hop is dead, he was saying a lot. One, he was kind of commenting on what was happening out of the South, because a lot of East Coast gatekeepers didn't want, they felt like, yo, we made hip hop, so we are the ones who get to say what hip hop is and what hip hop isn't. And in a lot of cases, I think it was that mentality that did kind of sideline New York for much of what's happened in hip hop, at least in like the last 20 years. Dang. But then what Nas was doing in that song, if you go back and listen to it, he said, if hip hop should die before I awake, I'll go to the station and, have it out with the DJ.
Gotcha.
So he was kind of almost fighting to bring life as he defined it to hip hop. So it wasn't this like, it was a loaded statement.
Sure, it was a loaded statement.
And years later, he's still putting out records. He's still putting out hip hop. He's still putting out hip hop. His expression of it. So I think that's one thing that I thought was pretty valuable to bring into the conversation, is that all things go through cycles, right?
Right.
And we've seen it. We've seen people say what Christian hip hop is and what it ain't. Yeah. We've seen the conversation about, somebody said, man, Christian hip hop ain't dead. Y'all dudes are just old. And it's like that was with Soulja Boy.
I think that was Caleb Gordon who said that.
I think so. And then
shout out Caleb. His
but that's what Soulja Boy was saying. Soulja Boy, Ice-T came out at one.
Lil Uzi Vert said some stuff like that before too.
Yeah, and like I remember at the time and during that hip hop is dead, a lot of that was falling on Soulja Boy, because you said ringtone rap, and that Crank That was was crushing it. And I remember Ice-T came out and named Soulja Boy as the reason that why hip hop was dead. And Soulja Boy says, he's like, man, y'all just old. Y'all old dudes, just old, and y'all don't know. Y'all trying to define it. Oh, but quick tip.
What?
Let me rewind it. We talking about 2007, 2008. Let me take you back to 1997.
Take it back.
There were folks who were saying that hip hop died then.
With who?
So, and because I said this on Andy's Work in Progress tapes. Podcast. People were saying prior to that.
This is Shiny Suit era.
Let me say this. Questlove said this in his book in 1997. People were saying hip hop died because it changed. It transitioned from the golden era with the boom bap, the jazz, to the shiny suit era, and people were saying that Diddy killed hip hop. So it's not a new conversation. I think what we're trying to say is not a new conversation. There are these cycles. And in Christian hip hop, it seems there's a cycle that's going on where there's a almost like a third changing of the guard.
It is. I mean, I was watching forget his name, Mike, not Mike Winger, but Alan Parker. He's a YouTuber, and Ambassador was on his show talking about Christian hip hop. And shout out to Ambassador.
Yeah,
he kind of gave, obviously those guys are fans of the golden era of Christian hip hop.
Yeah,
we can talk about that cross movement, that high theology, the bars, and how it went into reach. And that was a season, and still those remnants of that. But he talked about the cycles that you mentioned, and how things have changed, have been some step backs, have been some growth, some tension. But he did point to the future and say, wow, there is room and more space for the different expressions of Christian hip hop. And so I wonder when people say Christian hip hop is dead, I want to know, do they mean that their expression of it maybe is not evolving, or maybe their expression of it is not where they want it to be? You know what I'm saying?
And there's some, I was listening to Ruslan, one of Ruslan's videos where he was having the conversation. I thought he said something that was really helpful, or one of his guests said something that was helpful, where they said, man, I tend to think of Christian hip hop not as an industry, but as a community. And so I think I agree with you, where there could be multiple things happening at once. I think maybe what some people are talking about is the death of a feeling of community.
Okay.
And I could get with that. I could see how that could be a legitimate, because I don't know everything. Again, I'm gonna come back to Christian Grey, because I remember when I heard his music, man, him and John J. Givens had a record together on that album, and I just remember thinking to myself, like, oh my goodness, this is
right.
Open up, baby. You know, or no, it was I'm sorry. I might just be trying to find excuses to sing those songs.
I think you just
like
like singing slick.
I just love
Marcus
that.
is trying to get on a BGV. Yo,
am.
Dre and Alex.
Sign me.
Don't
Sign me.
Just don't approve it.
Anyway, he had a record, and I remember I saw Christian in person at church here in Atlanta, and somebody told me that he was going through some things and that he wouldn't be releasing music. And I just remember being so like, I was like, dang, really? Because I thought he was really good. I was crushed, because I was like, man, I think what he's doing is a sign that this thing can.
Yeah, he did have a lot of like dynamics to his style.
Yeah, he's had like dynamic. Because also
let me say that.
Also, I grew up a dancer as well, and so hip hop.
So you sing and dance?
Oh man, I do a lot of things. Hip hop is not just rapping.
Facts.
And you know that the culture is alive.
Facts.
When the other art forms is fashion, it's dance. Hip hop is fashion, it's dancing, is
sometimes
it's education.
Let me take it a step further. Currently, it's melodic.
Well, right now it's the
it's
music. So music is a part of hip hop.
Gotcha.
And there are other, like, if you're just talking about the music, then you're talking about the music, and you can take the culture
sure
off of it. But if you're talking about the culture, you're talking about the music, you're talking about the educational component, you're talking about the other art forms that reinforce the music. And all I'm trying to say is, I felt like what Christian was doing was making space for the other expressions of the culture. Like, I never saw him before, but I used to listen to his music and dance, and I would just be like, oh, okay, so we can do that over here. And to that point of community, I think maybe, I don't know the full story. I don't know much of the story, but I would wonder if in his experience, maybe there was some letdown in terms of the community.
Yeah.
Maybe he felt like he wasn't supported. So I think sometimes when people say that, based on my limited awareness of Christian story and some of the things that were said, some of the good things I thought that were said on Ruslan's show, I think, there's a part of this where people may be talking about letdowns, where people might be talking about relational hurts.
Or even so, you mentioned people say, Ruslan has said Christian hip hop is more of a community than an industry. Yeah. Obviously, we sit right in the seat of art and commerce. We are a Christian hip hop industry.
Yeah.
And I wonder if, even like what Brandon Boone had tweeted, I wonder if some of the disconnect or those statements of Christian hip hop is dead is referring to industry. infrastructure,
Yeah,
business,
yeah.
like the
Well, and that's-
container
yeah.
that the community. Like, so like, and I see where some people are maybe say that. I know that we always have conversations about how can we better build industry and infrastructure. I think we actively try to do that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of opportunities for growth in
Yeah,
Christian hip hop to have more of that.
and
You know what I'm saying?
And this is one of them. I didn't know. So shout out to James,
Yeah.
at Holy Culture, who basically created this channel. I didn't know that this existed a year ago.
Right.
So I think that sometimes the lack of awareness of the structures that are there
in place. Okay.
can sometimes lead us to say things like that or to believe things like that. And maybe there's a I was talking to Shane Kidd, who some people may not know him, but he's been around and he's a friend of a lot. He's a friend of Christian hip hop. He's an artist. So he's at my house last night and we were talking about this. And he said, man, sometimes when people make those comments about the industry, I wonder if it's because they have a picture of success in their minds that they're wrestling with, that picture may not be coming into fruition, which is another thing that I thought of was, well, there are larger market dynamics that are happening in music that are affecting. So we talked about the cycles that hip hop has gone through. At the end of the year last year, what were the major headlines? Carl Cherry was in Billboard magazine addressing this issue that a lot of people feel like hip hop is dying. For the last 5 years or so, hip hop ascended. The data is suggesting that the dominance of hip hop is falling. Yeah. It's not the number one. And for the last 5 years, hip hop has enjoyed the position of being the most dominant music. And it is, but the thing is, the market share is starting to drop. The other genres are picking up. I want to say more about that, but it seemed like you had.
No, I think that people. So, like, I saw someone made it who thought about, like, I think there was some tweets and comments about Christian hip hop is dead because, like, the success of the Craze Anomaly. Shout out that album. Like, Billboard #1 album, we're never gonna see that again. And when I zoom out a little bit, market wise, we're in a different space.
That's good.
Where the probability of in the streaming era for Christian hip hop to go #1, like the way that music is consumed, marketed, and distributed,
it's a different landscape. It's a completely different landscape.
You can even look at hip hop in general. Like, people were doing like 2 million records a week. It's just Christian hip hop has created a lot more saturation, which I believe is in some ways a good thing. Like, the No Big Deals of the world, the John Keefes of the world, like, there's more. The Scooty Wops, the Caleb Gordons, like, it's pretty.
And I think that's why that's a good one. That's a good one to kind of end this segment on, and we can come back and talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
But we're gonna take a break. If you're just joining us, this is 116 Life.
Yeah.
We're gonna take a break. We got some amazing more of this Christian hip hop that we've been talking about. We're gonna play some for you right after the break, and we'll be back. Keep it locked. It's Holy Culture Radio. If you're just joining us, my name is Marcus. This is the 116 Life. I'm here with my good friend.
Shout out Marcus. I'm Ace Harris. We here just having a really dope conversation here. CHH is dead, or is it? It's a question mark.
We're talking about the topic of, is Christian hip hop dead? And so far, we've covered our entry point into Christian hip hop. We've covered a little bit of the market dynamics, some of the reasons why people may or may not be saying that Christian hip hop is dead.
Right.
And for our maybe to close today's show out, maybe we can kind of talk about more future-leaning things.
Sure.
And I wanted to pick it back up with the thing that you said of that there's room for more people. There was another statistic that I was reading coming into the new year, and you actually posted this, something similar to our exec chat, which is basically suggesting that the top artists, so Warner and putting out their revenue statement for at the end of last year or whatever the report was, basically said that in the past their top 5 artists had accounted for something around like 15% of their revenue. Well, that has dropped drastically. I can't exactly remember the number, but I want to say it's down to like 5%, something like that. So that's a 10% drop. And basically, one of the things that, or one of the insights there was that there's a rise of the middle class in music now.
Yeah.
Basically, there's room for more people. The music is no longer being dominated by these like top tier acts.
Right.
Not just, I mean, to be one artist who's contributing to something around like 5% of the biggest, IP organization, that's still a huge deal. But that drop in market share is showing that there's sort of a middle class and more people can sustain themselves in music. So
what do you think is driving that?
Streaming. 100%. It's streaming.
Okay.
And the internet, and the fact that now it used to be, and I want to go back to Anomaly, because that was my first release that I worked at Reach was Tedashi's Below Paradise. I was an intern. I got hired full time in August. Hit the ground running on Anomaly. When we dropped Anomaly, we beat out, I believe, Mac Miller and Ariana Grande for the #1 record in the country. And you said
Maroon 5 too?
And Maroon 5. But the thing is, we weren't really thinking that that wasn't a goal, anything. We were just doing our thing.
Yeah.
And then we looked up and it was like, hey, it was like Thursday, it was like, hey, it's close. And so we threw the gears on. And a lot of what was driving that was physicals. Because Christian music hadn't quite streaming hadn't quite
it wasn't even
impacted Christian music yet. Justin Bieber was like the first artist to get a deal that accounted for streaming.
Right.
So it was basically what I'm trying to say is that was a completely different industry.
Facts.
It's a completely different industry now.
Totally different.
Because of streaming and because of the ways now that music can be monetized through the rise of folks like DistroKid, through the rise of folks like TuneCore, through the rise of folks like Sony's Orchard. There's so much more money out here to be gotten, and maybe more like a granular sense. So I think those are some of the factors that are driving this.
Yeah, it's like a democratization of music.
Yes, it's a lot more.
The middle class has figured out the system. They're not held back by the gatekeepers, by the industry, and they are empowered. And we're seeing that from the indie DIY artists to all these different metrics, and that is influencing and informing Christian hip hop. It would be really dope to see. It would be dope to see like a market share analysis of Christian hip hop music, year by year,
year by
consumption.
year.
It would be dope to kind of see, because yes, those big Billboard moments. We haven't had those moments in a while, but at the same time,
the market share is there. And I think the importance of. I think the important thing, I bring that up hopefully to be encouraging. Yeah. Because some of my best friends work at major labels. Shout out to JD Tominski over at Def Jam. Shout out to Amber Grimes here at Love Renaissance. Right. There's just a number of people out there that that I'm friends with at majors and independents. Rachel White, who oversees marketing over at Sub Pop. And I'm not a musician, but as an executive, I can look across the table and see and say, you know what? I'm sure things are different at Def Jam, but I also am like, hey, I'm making a living just like they are, and there may be there may be some differences in our lives.
So a critic would say, well, you work at Reach Records and you guys are monopolizing the industry, so therefore CHH. Those are some of the comments I've been reading about.
I think that's a real thing, and and being the chief marketing officer at Reach Records, I have to acknowledge that. But I think even with Holy Culture, I know we're not the only ones getting checks,
bro. It's like
Holy Culture,
and so this is kind of like, this is not to combat, but just to give insight that if the industry and infrastructure, quote unquote, is dead, or some people feel that way, I just see things differently. I think there's industry and infrastructure that's building and it's growing. And the community aspect, which some people probably hearken like the community to what it was in the golden era. And I think the community aspect, the industry aspect, and the music aspect, it's not that it's dead. I think it's just evolved.
Yeah.
And the word pivots, it's not even that it's pivot, it's grown. It looks different.
And
it's transformed.
It transforms, and that's
You know
something that I've had to. I mean, I've been at Reach Records almost 10 years. So I've seen a lot of these different cycles. I also started a business last year. And
say more about it.
Yeah, so a couple friends of mine and I started a coffee company in the end of 2019, 2020.
It's called Portrait Coffee.
Portrait Coffee. And what I learned in starting that business, it's coming up on, and I don't mind sharing this, we're coming up on almost $1 million plus in revenue.
That's amazing.
And what I realized, that doesn't mean I'm getting.
So Marcus, what's up, man? Let me hold some.
Well, that doesn't mean that I have $1 million in the bank. That means that's just the type of cash. That's just the type of revenue that business has been able to do. And what I've learned in starting something from the ground up is the cycles that things go through, and how, we started that company without $1. That business didn't have $1 to its name, but through, startup tactics, things like that, it grew. And, even in the 3 years, there have been sort of these ebbs and flows. But that was very helpful to me as an executive at Reach Records, because I'm like, all businesses go through cycles. You're going to have those years where things are rock hot. And you're going to have years where you kind of have to say, it's time to reinvent. Because of the recession, the cost of coffee doubled. So that means everybody had to reinvent their coffee business last year, because the cost of coffee went up.
So are you saying it's either evolve or die?
On some level, yeah.
So if it is, so I don't want to see a through line between it being dead as a maybe it's not evolution.
It's an evolution thing. I think you have to adapt. It's happening in basketball right now.
Bro, no defense?
Well, not even that. It's like, these guys, LeBron is 20 years in. Steph Curry is, just won his ring. Them guys don't, but there's these younger guys. The game is changing. It's not like it used to be.
Every generation in every industry, it's not limited to Christian, but has that barbershop hot take of, it's like, man, it's not what it used to be. It's not this, it's not that. And I just want to, and even sometimes it can incite a lot of like pushback from the people who are thriving in it. So I noticed a lot of comments for some of the younger guard kind of clapping back at that tweet or clapping back at that comment.
Yeah.
And I think what we're trying to do is like not like, I don't want to lean into negative talk or unwholesome stuff. I want to build up the space, the industry, the community, the music, and say, hey, you're allowed to say what you say, but maybe let's not respond so negatively to those comments or call people names, but let's point to what is happening and the opportunities that God has allowed us to steward and hold on to that. Let's build community. Let's build infrastructure. To me, saying something is dead or clapping back at somebody for saying something is dead, I don't know how constructive that conversation is. So our takeaway, I think, is like, all right, I hear what you're saying. I see how you're responding. What is constructive? What is building up Christian hip hop? And how do we do that? And pointing to the actual successes that we do see.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So,
and there's some real things. Now, I want to shout this out. I do think there is some real, we have some real moments that we have to look at, though, like the fact that, a lot of us were on break last year. I know I needed my 2 weeks to just unplug. But as we've been kind of coming back into the fold, one thing that I'm finding out is that Rapzilla needed to fundraise at the end of the year to kind of keep themselves afloat. And it's like, wait a minute, this is the same. This is the Christian hip hop. Like, let's make no mistake about it. Like, Rapzilla is Christian hip hop.
Facts.
As much as Reach Records is. Like, without Rapzilla, there is not a lot of what we know. and they were in that position. So I think that does say something about that. Hey, we do got a little bit of, we got some taking care of to do. We got some building up some to do. I felt that.
I can hear if that's, but I don't know if that need warrants It's Dead.
Yeah.
And that's
so
why
it's almost like there's this, maybe to kind of land the plane here.
Yeah.
There's opportunity. There's where there's smoke, there's fire. Right? So people are saying that there's something worth leaning in there, whether it's from a business perspective, whether it's from a community perspective, or whether it's from a spiritual perspective, because some are kind of having that come in. Used to be, you had to be theological to even get in. Nobody would take you serious if you couldn't run down.
If you can't run them 5 points.
If you couldn't run the 5 points of Calvinism, you couldn't get in. But now we got these lifestyles. I think one of the things that was at the center of this was folks were saying that Blessings by Lecrae wasn't a Christian rap song. So some people would take that to say, oh.
You mean talking about, I think Caleb Gordon said that.
Yeah, said that Lecrae's Blessings wasn't a Christian song. And I mean, hey,
whatever.
But some people would take that, the fact that you don't have to say Jesus, the fact that people sometimes are making more, I think what Ruslan called it was lifestyle music.
Yeah.
They would take the presence of lifestyle music to say, oh, there's more lifestyle music than, but it's like that's the same thing that happened in general hip hop. It used to be, you know what I mean? Like you had the, can I kick it? Yes, you can. Well, I'm gone. Introduction, have a nice I am. Tell your mother, send a father, tell a telegram. It used to be you had to be able to do that to be legitimate, but then Soulja Boy came in
Boy, now.
And it's like, okay.
So is that not hip hop? Is it dead because it doesn't follow the script of how it was? And I think that there's beauty in diversity.
Yeah, and development. Yeah.
And so I think it's allowing people to, and this is what I will say too. A lot of times whenever something, and this is kind of giving some kind of, when Christian hip hop came on the scene, the gatekeepers of Christian culture were extremely against it.
Oh yeah.
This is the devil's music, this is demonic, right? And this is the funny thing. People who said that were probably playing worship music that, ironically, is inspired by the chord progressions of soft rock from the 90s, or playing gospel music that's inspired by the soul and jazz of like the 50s.
And the blues,
so
all of that. So
what is the sound of the gospel? What is it?
Limo said this to me, and I thought it was so good. He said, Christian music doesn't have a sound. It has a heartbeat.
That's facts.
And I love that. And I do think, that there is something to, again, I'm gonna go over to basketball. I grew my basketball heyday was Allen Iverson. My man, 6 foot tall, playing broken.
He was 5'10".
Broken. We're gonna give my guy his 2 inches, okay?
You give him 5'11".
Playing with the broken ribs and all of this and that, and just the heart, right? And that was, to me, that was basketball. That's what you do. You sacrifice. You know what I mean?
Right.
We've played together. That's why I get so. But now you see guys like Kawhi Leonard, low management. You can say, oh man, these new guys are soft. That ain't basketball. And it's like, wait a minute. Do you think if Allen had the opportunity and the freedom and the flexibility that Kawhi had, you don't think he would take that to prolong his career? He probably would. And so in the same respect, some of these guys who, probably felt like, oh, I have to fit in, I have to really, and some guys, that's their comfort zone. I'm going to get on this joint and I'm going to exegete. Some guys, and that's cool.
That's great.
Need that,
yeah.
Thank you to Shy Lynn. Thank you to Stephen the Levite. I know more theology. I used to show up to ministry class ready to go. Oh, hypostatic union? Oh, I got that. What we talking about? Limited substitutionary atonement? I got that. And it came from the music. So all of that to say, man, there's a lot to celebrate. There's a lot to do. Maybe we might have to part 2 this conversation. That's our time for today. Thank y'all for listening in. Thank you for everyone who supported us once again. This is the 116 Life. My name is Marcus.
I'm Ace Harris.
You can find us if you have questions for us and things like that. Hit us up at Reach Records on all social platforms. Hit us up. What do you want to talk about? What do we leave out? Let us know.
Yeah, sure.
Keep it locked for more music. Thank you. This is Holy Culture Radio.
It's good.